From a 3,000-year-old air conditioner to a device that can accurately predict the future, here are 5 more inventions, each more advanced for its time. Starting with a creation that every human would struggle to live without. In Egypt, when the sky became cloudy or night fell, a major problem arose. The sundial they normally used to tell the time became useless, making work and navigation impossible to track. So, to combat this, they created a device 2,700 years before the first mechanical clock. Although the design was simple, the craftsmanship required had to be extremely precise. The clock consisted of a stone bowl filled with the perfect amount of water, flowing steadily through a small hole at the bottom, which exited into a separate container. Because the Egyptians split both day and night into 12 hours, the clock had 12 separate markings. But there was a small problem. When the water level began to decrease, so did the pressure, meaning the amount of water leaving the bowl became slower. To solve this, they adjusted the hour markings accordingly, making the gaps uneven, while also taking into account that the bowl got narrower towards the bottom. Over the 12-hour period, the stone bowl was only off by about 10 minutes, which for that age is extremely accurate. 2,700 years ahead of its time, the Egyptians had made the first ever clock to function without the sun or mechanical gears. And while this timekeeping device was later replaced by something more convenient, the next design is still found in homes around the world today. In ancient Egypt, the sun wasn't just hot, it was deadly. Desert air could reach over 113 degrees Fahrenheit, dehydrating the body in minutes. Homes only made it worse, trapping the heat inside like an oven. So, the Egyptians needed a solution fast. But how is it possible to cool a house without energy? Egypt had a very consistent wind traveling from north to south. So across the Nile Valley, they built high towers with an entrance at the top to catch the cooler winds. As the breeze entered, it got forced downward through narrow shafts. Wet cloths, jars, and cooled water basins were placed inside. As the hot wind passed, the water absorbed its heat, thereby lowering the air's temperature. Once it entered the room, any stale air was pushed up through the opposite vent, creating the perfect cycle. The wind catcher could drop the heat inside a building up to 22 degrees Fahrenheit, stopping anyone inside from overheating. 3,200 years ahead of its time, the Egyptians created their own automated air conditioner. But as the Egyptians were about to set their sights on a device capable of predicting the future, they first needed something else, a complex tool that would allow them to build it. As Egyptian civilizations expanded, it began building on a grander scale than ever before. But to build higher, you first need a solid foundation beneath. This created a big problem. As the ground was made from hard rock, digging through diorite with conventional tools took them years. So they invented a device that helped build Egypt's greatest constructions, including the Great Pyramid itself. The 4,000-year-old mechanical drill. But without engines or electricity, how would they power it? Their solution was genius. The main section was made from copper tubes and wood. A weight would be placed on top to hold it in place. Then a slurry of quartz sand mixed with water would surround the bottom as an abrasive. Finally, a bow was wrapped around the wooden part of the drill. As the Egyptians pushed the bow back and forth, the copper core spun, causing the quartz sand to grind away at the hard rock, cutting it with precision. After they reached the desired depth, a core would be left, which they'd snap off using a special chisel, leaving the perfect hole. 4,600 years ahead of its time, the Egyptians created a drill without the need for engines and hydraulics. They could now build a lot faster, but none of this mattered without the next invention, the one that kept them alive. In ancient Egypt, life itself depended on a single river, the Nile. Conditions were so harsh that every harvest relied on a yearly flood that came between June and September. Too little water, and the crops would wither and die. Too much, and the farmland, along with entire villages, would be swept away. But what if there was a way to predict the level of the flooding months in advance and stop the deaths of thousands of people? That's when they engineered a brilliant solution: the Nilometer. Along the riverbanks, the Egyptians carved deep stone shafts into the riverbed, marked with precise measurements. As the weather changed and heavy rains fell in Ethiopia, the Nile began to rise. Each day, they could measure these rising water levels from Egypt, allowing them to predict the strength of the incoming flood and prepare any defenses in advance. Once the flood arrived, they used the Nilometer again to forecast the quality of the harvest and how much food they would have for the year. A level below 12 cubits meant famine, not enough water for crops. Between 12 and 16 meant a perfect flood, enough to fertilize the fields. Above 16 cubits meant disaster. Homes and farmlands would be washed away. 4,800 years ahead of its time, without satellites and supercomputers, the Egyptians could forecast their harvests with nothing but stone and water. Despite the Nilometer allowing them to see into the future, we can understand how they did it. But the same can't be said for this next discovery: a different type of technology containing knowledge that everyone thought impossible for its time. 5,000 years ago, if you had a life-threatening injury, your chances of survival were almost non-existent. Information about how the human body worked was extremely limited, so most civilizations believed that magic or herbs were the only things to stop you from dying. However, the Egyptians were not your average society. A lost paper that was transcribed 100 years ago shows that they'd already made medical discoveries that took thousands of years to rediscover. In fact, several of the discoveries remain the state-of-the-art procedure in modern surgeries today. The 15-foot scroll lists 48 cases of injuries, including fractures, wounds, dislocations, and tumors. Each trauma is broken down into a 4-section guide. First is a description of the wound, then an examination, followed by a prognosis and treatment. The methods included surpass some of history's smartest doctors, such as Hippocrates, who's referred to as the father of medicine. But this isn't even what shocked scientists the most. The paper includes accurate descriptions of the human brain, its protective layers, the fluid that cushions it, and how the brain pulses inside the head. The papyrus dates back to 1650 BCE, but its grammar and terminology makes experts believe it's a copy of an even older text from 3000 BCE, which would mean that 5,000 years ahead of their time, way before the invention of modern body scans, the ancient Egyptians had already understood the inner workings of the human body with great accuracy. The discoveries that archaeologists make in ancient Egypt continue to amaze us. Their creations didn't just shape their world, but they built the foundation for ours.